Welcome to Transition Talks, Business Exit and Retirement Strategies with Josh Ackerman. Get ready to be immersed in real-life experiences and strategies of business owners who have transitioned their enterprises, whether by selling or handing over the reins to the next generation. Through candid conversations and expert insights, Josh aims to provide practical tips and proven techniques to tackle the complexities of succession planning. Let's embark on your next chapter together.
Hello, and welcome to the Transition Talks podcast with your host, Josh Ackerman. Josh, how are you, my friend?
Bill, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really well. I'm excited because the days are longer, the temperature's rising, and I feel like maybe spring is actually going to be here.
Yes, I would agree. I was out this morning and I was thinking, it's actually light out here.
Yes.
How wonderful. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So what do we have on the table today?
So today we've got a guest, Justin Schuhmacher. And Justin is an attorney and deals a lot with estate planning, elder planning, and what we're going to talk about mostly, who knows where we'll go, but we're going to start talking about inheriting a farm and some of the complications that come from inheriting the farm as the business. And I think there will be parallels, obviously, to other family businesses, but I think the specific concept of inheriting the farm will itself be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, no. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that while farming can be a passion, and certainly most farmers are passionate about it, it is still, at the end of the day, a business that has to be run. And at some point, it's a business that has to be transitioned to others. So
exactly.
Looking forward to this.
Yep. Justin, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, guys. Thanks again for having me. I'm excited about today. I really am. And I appreciate the opportunity.
No, I think it'll be interesting. So why don't you start out, if you would, and give us kind of a brief introduction. How did you wind up here?
Okay.
How long have you been in practice? All those kinds of questions.
Sure. Well, Josh, I'm a second career attorney. So First of all, I'll say if anybody has good lawyer jokes, you will not offend me if you have them. I'm always eager to learn some new ones because when everybody uses that whole stereotypical, the lawyer, this, that, and the other, I'm like, you're right. A lot of them are that way. So anyways, I was actually a high school teacher and I taught and coached football and I did those things for a dozen years before I got this wild idea to go back to school and further my education. And as they say, the rest is history. I am now an attorney that does estate planning primarily. Mm-hmm. We also do some estate administration, but I'm a farm boy at heart. So I grew up on a farm, several generations of farmers. My father farmed kind of as a side on the side with in addition to his other job. But so a lot of times when we have clients that have these same issues we're going to try to talk about today, I'm usually the attorney at our office that meets with them, but not always. Just have a little different insight and perspective maybe than some other folks. I kind of like to use the phrase, take the time to walk the fence row. Learn a little bit about their operation to kind of get in their head and figure out where they're coming from, what's important to them, and so forth. But I have one more cliche joke before I go on. So I taught and all those things for a dozen years, did economics, government, United States history, the stuff that the same three kids continue to participate, or else it was the other 22 kids. You had to go kick their desk to wake them up. But I tell everybody I went to law school not to be an attorney, just to meet one. And as it turns out, I met my wonderful wife, Jenny, in law school, and she was actually in the firm that we're at now. She's been here like 12, 13 years, but she's the one that brought me on board. And then probably 5-6 years ago, we actually purchased the law firm from the founding partner. So we're in it for the long haul, I guess, but it's exciting. It's fun. I love getting to meet new people, learning their story, trying to help them figure it out, so to speak.
That is, Justin, that's exactly what it's funny you use those words, because I talk about my job, and one of the things I love about this job is I get to meet a new person and walk around inside their life.
Yeah.
And see things from their perspective. And to me, it's just fascinating. I love that part of the job.
Same. I agree.
Yeah. So there may be a second podcast to talk about buying the law firm and the transition of the law firm, because I think that's another interesting idea. And for the record, if I was working in an office with my wife on a daily basis, I do not believe that I would still be alive.
We're pretty open and candid with other people about kind of talking about what makes it work, and we're the opposite. We're total opposites in many ways. Other ways we're kind of similar, but we even tell people we have a couple different office locations, so we're not always at the same place at the same time.
Sure.
But when we are at the same place at the same time, there are many days that we drive separately. There's a whole funny story about one time we did ride together and I got ditched. She went home at the end of the day and left me at the office. But we kind of used that time to be alone, to kind of get ready for the day as we're driving in, and also to commute home, kind of unwind. Because after a while, you can talk about work a little too much at home. So, yeah.
Sure. I get it. No, that's great. So let's talk about if the farm owner, the farmer, comes into your office to talk about estate planning. Is there a common conversation about what we're going to do with the farm? Is there a common set of expectations on the farmer's part about what's going to happen?
Honestly, I would say no, because there is no such thing as two scenarios that are the exact same. And so I can't say there's a cookie cutter conversation. There's a couple general guidelines. You're going to say, okay, well, have you first of all put any thought into what this is going to look like? But I just don't think you can say that, nope, this is the exact conversation you're going to have every time. It really just does not work that way. I mean, I'll maybe share a couple stories as we go on, but
sure.
I'm thinking of some, there are some farmers that maybe don't have kids that are interested in carrying on the operation. Whereas I know we're probably going to focus on some situations where maybe one of the children is interested, the others are not. How do we manage that? So me being long-winded and probably talking too much, I should have just said, no, there's no
nope, there are none.
There's no exact conversation that's the same every time.
So just because I think I started talking to my clients, my existing clients, about the idea of focusing on working with family-owned businesses. And I had two separate clients, independent of each other, approach me after I had kind of communicated this was a new niche I was working on, and say, I wish my dad had talked to you 40 years ago about what he was going to do with the business, because dad transitioned the business to my brother. My brother doesn't have any business sense at all. He took a very successful business and drove it straight into the ground. And everyone would have been happier if dad had sold the business sort of at the peak and everyone had gotten a check. And so if someone comes in and they say, I've got the farm, neither of my kids has any interest in being a farmer, this is just my own curiosity, who buys the farm? Is it a conglomerate? Is it another local? Is it some of both?
It's some of both, but in my experience, it's mostly a local. And if you follow the farming industry, we would know that there are fewer and fewer farmers. Those that are in operation are getting larger and larger and larger. And part of that's by necessity, because if you're going to continue to pay the bills, you have to gobble up more land to be able to farm in many instances. So what we found is a lot of times if the family has decided this is not something that we're going to continue. We've found oftentimes that the buyer is somebody local. And that's going to be dependent, I think, on where you're located in the U.S. Certainly, if you're in a place that's becoming developed pretty rapidly, there's some areas around where we're located that we are seeing that, and there's some really interesting dollar figures being tossed around when you think about some of that land. But what I've seen primarily, it's going to be somebody that's already established in that geographic area.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's approach this kind of from a different direction then. Do you have an example of a transition that you feel like went particularly well?
Yeah.
That we could learn something from?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I think transition planning, whether it's a farm or any small business, first of all, we know that if you have that farm, if you're a farmer, you're wired a little differently. And I don't mean that as something negative. I just mean you have a passion for that people just do not understand. It is in your blood. And the same can be said of, I think, any small business owner that has built something. They're very proud of that they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. And we sometimes jokingly say, but maybe it's not a joke. And I've heard the kids say this. I think Dad loves the farm more than he loves us. And I think there is a little bit of, question whether that's true or not, because maybe it is a bit. But I would tell people, first of all, transition planning is really, really, really easy. You know why? The key is don't ever die.
That's right.
Don't die. Don't age. Don't ever lose your physical or mental sharpness and capacity. If you can handle that, we don't ever have to worry about this conversation.
Exactly.
And I say that, a little bit facetiously. Mostly my clients, they get to know me and kind of get my sense of humor, and we laugh a little bit too. But, sometimes clients will say, now, Justin, if I pass away, and I'll stop them and I'll say, I hate to be the one to break the news. This is not an if question. We have to face some of these questions with, taking the emotional side out of this and just be very realistic. We have to look in the mirror. We have to analyze and think about the people that are in our inner circle, who we might entrust this to. And so I say all that because, first of all, if you're working with, whether it's a farm family or any business owner, sometimes we just got to say, okay, we got to be realistic, first of all. These things are going to happen. This is what you worked so hard for. Why don't we do some planning now? Instead of putting the blinders on, pretending this day will never come, you worked hard for this. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. Let's build a plan so we've set the next generation up for success so they can take what you've done and take it either to the next level or at the very least not screw it up. Kind of like the example you'd mentioned. So as far as examples I think have worked really, really well. One in particular, a gentleman who we've worked with for many years. I give him credit because he has 4 children. Okay. He's done some very good trust planning, business planning with establishing a couple business entities with his farming operation. 3 of his 4 kids they're out doing well. They're professionals in other industries. One son is back there on the operation. He's the heir apparent. Well, guess what Dad's done over the years? He realized, he said, I remember how frustrated I was when Dad would wait forever and ever to start letting me make decisions. He's several years ago already started involving his son in decision making, where he has the ability, while his son is kind of learning, he can counsel him. He can advise him. He can see if son makes a mistake. At that point, he hadn't even turned over business ownership yet, but he was already involving him in decision making because he could see beyond, just 10 feet in front of him. He could see that there's some long-term thought that needs to go into this. And that way, if son starts to make a decision that's a little questionable, he can counsel him. And he can say, before we do this, let's talk about maybe some experiences I had in the past in a similar situation. And here's where it maybe didn't go so well. And as a result of that, this same particular individual, he has started to sell at a discount, but sell some of the shares of his farming operation to this son. blood, sweat, and tears. The equity of the sweat equity is partly for his discount, but then he's able to use some of those funds. He's working with the financial advisor to build up a few other funds that aren't tied to the land that can be there for the other kids as well. And the other part,
beautiful. Yeah.
The other part about, you get me on a tangent, I'll talk forever. So we joke that's probably why we only do flat fee billing, because if Justin talks forever, the hourly rate would be crazy and all. But anyways, but that same family. Dad's been transparent with the other kids. He says, "Look, you're not going to get an asset that's worth as much, but let's look at what it brings in terms of return." You're going to get some stocks, bonds, mutual, whatever, but the potential possibly for the earnings on those is probably greater than what this, probably multi-million-dollar asset of this land is going to be for your brother. So they've been open, they've been transparent, and it's rare to find that.
It really is.
It's rare to find that, but it's working beautifully. And Dad's still around. He jokingly says, "I'm just the hired help now." So he gets his fix of farming, but he's not. He's like, "I don't have all the stress I used to."
Oh, well, and I think there are a lot of parallels. When I came into the business, my dad had been doing this since 1980. And so I started out in the business, and I had first Dad in the room doing meetings, and I was in there taking notes. And then we got to the point where I realized we had clients that had never been in a meeting with Dad. They didn't know him, but he had been figuratively, he'd been in every one of their meetings, because I would go into Dad an hour before the client comes in with pages of notes and piles of numbers and say, "How do I tell this story to Dad? How do I make this work?" And Dad would almost always say, "Fewer numbers and a better story to connect the numbers." And the point is not how much you know. The point is what the client is trying to get to. And so the idea of the farmer helping his son, bring the son in, let him make decisions with the benefit of 40 years of experience, that's a completely different thing than trying to do it by yourself.
And I couldn't agree more. The other thing that I think you look at is when you do allow, I call it the younger, the next generation to be a part of this, it's a little bit of a fresh set of eyes too. Where in any business, you've got to be looking to the future. You've got to be looking at ways to embrace what's coming so that you can not only survive, but thrive as time progresses. So I think there's added benefit there, because I'm also thinking on the counter argument, or the other side of this. I know of a family where, I'm not even making this up. Dad was in his 80s, and he still would not let Sonny Boy plant the corn. His son was like 60 years old, and it was such a control, I control this. I'm still your father. I'm doing this. And for many reasons, you could see where that's problematic. But just the idea of probably that old school way of thinking about things, they were still operating like they'd done 35 years ago in many ways, and they weren't growing. They weren't able to expand. And so I think there's a twofold benefit. One, you make it transparent. You make for a great transition and succession plan. But two, it also allows some new ideas to potentially come in to help better the operation, help improve it.
Sure. Well, and I think it's such a cliche, but I think there's a piece of truth in the middle. The idea of the younger person, more energetic, more interested in growth, more ambitious, and as you know far better than I do, the economics of farming continue to work against the small farmer.
Yes.
So what was a successful farm, and generated $25,000 in the 1960s, may still generate $25,000 in the 1960s, but inflation has chipped away at that pretty successfully, and this isn't going to work if it isn't going to be bigger.
Right, and it won't. Yeah, it will not survive much longer. Maybe it'll be a hobby farm, but it won't be something that can sustain a household.
Very interesting. So is there a story on the other side of that? A story where it didn't, other than the dad who won't let his 60-year-old son plant corn, which is such a family business dynamic story.
Yeah. Nobody knows it as well as dad. And you're right. Don't kill your father. I'm in charge. Well, I'm thinking of, I use this phrase a lot. And I would tell clients, whether they're farmers or not, whether they're business owners or not, fair and equal are not the same thing. You've got to get that out of your head. Fair and equal are not the same. So here's an example. Family farm. Grandpa was the control freak, so to speak. Nobody knew what was going on in the books. Only he knew about it. And he was a vibrant man up until he passed in his late 80s. But he said, nope, everybody's getting equal shares of my farming corporation. Okay. Even though one of the four, again, this seems to be the number thing. Yep. One of the four was actively involved in the operation for years, but really also wasn't even privy to a lot of the financials and things like that. Well, now we've got this situation where there are four shareholders of this corporation all owning 25% because that's equal. I don't know that it's fair, but it's equal. And now the one that's actually farming doesn't have the votes to make important decisions. He's trying, there's a couple that are hinting around perhaps about wanting to sell their ownership. What's he going to do? Having those conversations, I won't go down the rabbit hole of what those conversations led to. But at the end of the day, the concept here is the one involved doesn't have the votes to make important decisions unless he's got some strong alliances. And we've got, his argument is, well, they should hang on to it. The siblings ought to hang on to it because it's a couple thousand acres. So he's saying they've got like an asset that's, worth over $1 million just for their fourth. And trying to explain to him, it's like, no, they really don't, because they can't really sell it for the market value of it because there's going to be discounts on the sale of the shares. They can't really, the return they're getting on their quote $1 million is much lower since they're only getting rent from the land than what it would have been had they been able to invest it. So, I'm not saying I have a solution exactly of what they should have done, but I've got some ideas. But at the end of the day, I'm thinking there's another scenario where people got so focused on everything's got to be equal that it's not going to be what's that going to be then the next generation when it gets split from 4 to even more members? So without predetermining like an exit strategy for some of the kids that may not want to be involved and predetermining some guidelines on figuring out share buyouts and things like that, you're really not doing a very good service to your family.
And I think it comes back to that question of if I die, and helping people understand it's not if. So far, it's 100% as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I started out in the business selling life insurance, and the life insurance conversation taught me a lot of things. But one of them that I still use is the way that I describe people dying unexpectedly is I say that they got hit by falling space junk.
Yeah.
Because it often gets sort of a chuckle and it's not quite real, but it introduces the idea of you're not here anymore, and you need to do some talking and some planning between now and the day that's real, because if you don't, this thing is going to fall apart.
You're right. Just embracing the fact that is going to be reality at some point without trying to be so down and, in the dumps about it.
Exactly.
You're right. It's find a way to help people understand that you've got to come to terms with reality on some of these things that will happen. I think one of the concerns that a parent might have, and I've had this conversation, is going back to that whole thing, and I know I dwell on it, fair versus equal.
Yep.
Is, well, what if I do give, because at least where we're at in Indiana, real estate prices, farm ground, it is crazy what's going on with the values of the land here. And I'm sure that's pretty consistent in most places, if not everywhere across the country. But their concern is, well, what if I, pass the land to one of the children, but not all, and the others, I don't have enough financial assets to really make it equal. And most of the time they don't, and it's probably not even close. What if that child that inherits the land 3 years later just says, I'm cashing in, I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to get this windfall worth, millions and millions of dollars perhaps. Yep. And the other's got maybe a life insurance policy that, paying them $100,000 or whatever it may be. That's a real genuine concern they have. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for having that. And the siblings are a little worried about that too. So we've talked about and have done it for some people where we say, what if we utilize, some trust planning, establish a trust where you put your land in it. And we basically say, we build rules in we give them some guidance to say, hey, look, if the child that gets the land sells, after so many years, they've got to split some of the proceeds with their siblings. And if it's so many years after that, maybe they still have to split some of the proceeds, but maybe not as big of a percentage. And basically you can have kind of a sliding scale built in, but at least it's a way to give peace of mind to those parents to say, I'm not going to give land to Sonny Boy. And then a year later, he's like, farming's not as profitable as I thought it might be, or not as I'm burned out or whatever. I'm just going to sell all the land and pocket all the money. Well, that wouldn't be very fair. But at the same time,
it would be fair or equal.
Right. Yeah. There are tools that can be used to try to help eliminate some of that stuff and be out in front of it.
I think that's a really neat idea, especially with the idea of how difficult farming is on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of people who didn't grow up in the farming community, even people who did grow up, who get up and they're walking a fence row looking for places that they need to fix, and they're thinking to themselves, I've been walking this fence row since I was a kid. I've fixed this piece of fence 4 times. And I could see someone coming into that and saying, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And like you said, with land prices going where they've been going, and you get a pocket where the price is crazy, and you approach the son or daughter who inherited the land and say, hey, we'd like to give you $10 million.
Yeah. Kind of hard. That might be hard to pass up.
Might be hard to pass up. Yeah. And I think we've got just a pure tangent, but it's an interesting question. We've got a client who set up trusts for their children, and the trusts go into effect when the children reach the age 65.
Okay.
And the intent of the parents was, and the parents brought the idea to us and then to the estate planning attorney, was, we'll take care of retirement. You guys figure it out between now and then.
And it's interesting. It gives a little incentive to say, one, you're not just going to sit back and wait on a windfall. You got to kind of do something for yourself out there a little bit. And I've got a couple clients that was their MO as well. And it was like, I don't want to work so my kids don't do anything. I don't want to build this up so they're just, stagnant, but
right.
But let's give a little incentive built into this.
So with some tact, some sensitivity, my lunches with my buddy, the estate planning attorney in town, often have a short segment of the lunch conversation is, here's a story of the family that tore themselves apart over an estate valued at $4,000. And when the estate is even somewhat randomly assigned a value in the many millions as farmland is, because either its value as farmland or its value as real estate development, depending on where it is. Have you found any good conversations to have with clients to help the client understand no, you need to put these things in place, because if you don't, the risk to family unity is real.
Yes, I have. One of the things I tend to say a lot is, and most of the time they kind of grin and nod their head, if we're in a conference room talking to a family and say, let me tell you what, because here, lo and behold, here's what will happen. It's always the ones that the mom, dad say, oh, my kids would never fight. They always have gotten along. Those are the ones you're like, oh crap, right?
Here we go.
Watch for this one, because they just gave the famous, the infamous words. We know this one's cursed now, but I will say this: most of the time, in reality, families actually, I think, do a pretty good job of getting through that. I mean, you got to look at the fact that they've lost a loved one. There's emotion all over the place. They're trying to get things organized. Hopefully they had at least a good enough plan to get them in the right direction, to know what's supposed to happen. I will say this, in our experience, most of the time, families do a pretty good job of getting along. But what I will tell people that gets them to chuckle is, I'll say, guys, if we're in the conference room, you put a $5 bill on that table and people start to change. And when you start putting even more than a $5 bill on the table, they're going to change a lot more. So we want to make sure we don't leave a stone unturned. We're going to walk through a bunch of scenarios, and I just want you to tell me how you feel about these scenarios. Maybe they would never happen, but I'd rather, I'd tell people in law school, I don't know that I learned a lot. I learned how to study for a test when I needed to. I learned that anybody could sue anybody for anything at any time, but it doesn't mean they'll win. But I did learn, more importantly than anything, I think they do a great job of training people to think differently and think kind of like a paranoid person. Think about what could go wrong in this scenario. What could go wrong in that scenario? Let's plan for it, hoping we don't need it. But if we need it, we know we're already 2 or 3 steps ahead of it. So that's a job that we have, to try to coach our clients through those scenarios. And I think anybody that's in the similar chair as me, whether it's legal advice, financial advice, whatever it may be, tax planning, that's got to be part of the conversation. Is like, let's think ahead about some scenarios that may seem far off, but let's talk about it.
Exactly.
Because those scenarios, like your buddy mentioned, the $4,000 estate that everybody fought over, it's so preventable. I mean,
it really is. And from my perspective, you said something really interesting that I think is worth bringing back up. The idea of having conversations about somewhat unlikely scenarios, I think, has 2 purposes. I think there's, obviously, if this thing does happen, whatever it was, we like you said, we've got a couple steps on it. We're maybe a little bit ahead. The other piece is, by having those conversations, by putting yourself in those situations, I think it really helps the client clarify what really matters. And by kind of stress testing what you thought was important, we can help you see, well, maybe I am too focused on treating the children evenly instead of fairly. And because we brought up this sort of unrealistic scenario, you looked at it again and you said, no, that really is not what I was trying to do. I was trying to do this thing over here that's closer to fair. And I would say, from my perspective on the financial side, the questions of, what do you want to do when you retire? Who do you want to be when you're no longer the business owner, the farmer? What are you going to do with your day? Is a dangerous question if you only answer it once.
Yeah.
You can give me an answer that will be what you think I want to hear, what you think your spouse wants to hear. But if we can ask that question multiple times, and the idea of different scenarios kind of helps maybe disguise the fact that that's really what we're doing, is we're just asking the same question with slightly different directions. But it helps the client get their head around, no, this is what I really want to do. And it's never going to be done.
Yeah.
Right? That presumes that we as humans reach some point of, I'm now retired and I'm happy?
It triggered a thought, Josh.
Yeah.
You just describing that. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, farmers are typically wired a little differently. And a lot of business owners are. I think for many of them, not all, but many of them, retirement is to keep working. They love it so much that they want to keep doing it. So what it made me reflect on was the tale I told a little bit ago about the dad that's got the foresight, the dad that's already starting to turn some decision making over, because guess what? He's now getting to have the joy of watching the operation continue to expand with his son doing things. And he still gets to be, as he jokes, the hired help. He still gets to be involved in doing some of the work at his own leisure a little bit, maybe not. Right. So he still gets to be involved. And it wasn't like he had to totally give up that identity. It wasn't like he had to totally just, now he's sitting idle and sitting in the easy chair wasting away. He got to, I'm guessing him, like a lot of business owners and farmers, their idea of retirement is not to sit in the easy chair. It's to still be walking that fence row. It's still doing those things. And he gets the best of both worlds now because he was able to have that foresight, was able to, I'd say, starting the conversations early, being realistic and being transparent with everybody involved. And just, I wish all clients were that way. They're not. So our job is to try to help prod them along a little bit and tell them some of those positive stories so they realize it can be done, because they're sometimes pretty reluctant to want to face that.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I would like to thank you very much for coming in. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate the time.
I will tell you what, I've enjoyed it. I wish we had more time because I'd keep rambling on and on. And but Josh, I'll tell you, if you have anything else that, if we think that we could be helpful for you, let us know. I'd love to be back. And I just love your format. It's just it's a conversation. It's sharing ideas, sharing stories, and hopefully that we're reaching people that they can take something away and learn from that and give them some ideas of how they can create a positive and a successful transition plan for themselves.
That's great. And tell us how folks can find you. Where are you guys? And
sure.
What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, Indiana Estate and Elder Law. We're located in central Indiana. We're in Fishers, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis, but we have a couple other offices in smaller towns and more rural settings, Wabash, Indiana, and Rockville, Indiana. Our phone number 317-863-2030. But yeah, just check us out. Google us, Indiana Estate and Elder Law. And, somebody called us one time the unlawyers. And I took that as a high compliment because they said, you guys actually will just sit and talk with me and be a little bit more laid back. But with the type of law that we're doing, it's relationship based. And you do need to take the time to really get to know the families you're working with. So like you said much earlier, you need to walk in their shoes a little bit so that you can, understand their perspective. We try our best to take that approach. And I think, we're proud of what we're able to do to help so many families out there. And hopefully, like I said, our conversation, whether they're in Indiana or not, hopefully some people can get some great benefit from our conversation.
I'm hoping. All right. Thank you very much. Bill, you want to take us out?
Yeah, no, that was a great conversation. I think you need to have Justin back.
I think you're right. I told you I thought this was going to be fun.
Hey, I had to do my shameless plug, on the recording saying, hey, I hope you can have me back because now it's hard for you to say no.
That's right.
You fortunately are a lawyer who's not only good talking, but you can make sense. So, that's a big bonus.
I appreciate that because watching other attorneys, here I am bad talking my profession, but I've gone to continuing ed courses where, oh my goodness, it's so dry. Let's explain it so people can understand it. And I will say a lot of that goes back to 12 years as a classroom teacher. You had to meet people where they were, and those people didn't want to be in the room. Trust me.
No, I think there is a great value in being able to translate the profession into English.
Yeah. No doubt.
Very much so.
Whatever
Very
that
much
profession
so.
is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast who don't know it, Josh is very good at translating transition talk into English. So,
Right.
if you want to sit down and have a conversation with Josh, you can do that. And Josh, what's the best way for them to reach out and talk to you?
Best way is contextfinancial.com. And that's got email and phone numbers. And I'm happy to talk. No charge for the first conversation to see kind of where we are and whether we be a good fit.
That sounds good. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast who are not subscribers, the easiest thing you can do is lift your finger and hit the follow button. It's really that simple. Then you're a subscriber. And every time Josh drops a new edition of his podcast, you are notified. You can give it a listen. I would ask that if you like it, rate it. Give it a good rating. Tell people about it. Word of mouth promotion is very welcome. We would very much appreciate it. So till next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Josh and everybody at Context Financial. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Transition Talks, Business Exit and Retirement Strategies with Josh Ackerman from Context Financial. Are you a business owner looking to sell or make a transition? Connect with Josh on social media using today's show notes links. You might just be his next guest. To ensure you don't miss a new episode, please click the follow button. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Context Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.